I have a Windows XP PC setup, but I want to downgrade to Windows 98. Why? Well, for several reasons. First one is the hardware. This computer was designed for Windows 98. It has a CD drive. In the early 2000s, software came on DVDs and making CD drives obsolete as the floppy and CDH ends. The second reason is DOS support. Windows 98 can boot into real DOS. This means near perfect DOS compatibility. This means no wrapper and no emulation. Just pure nostalgia. Although I was born in 2010, but anyway. In this video, I'm going to try to downgrade from Windows XP to Windows 98 2nd Edition. Okay, that's enough of me yapping. You guys want to see action? Sure, now without further ado, let's get started. But first, we need to gather the specifications of our computer. So here we are on our Windows XP desktop. We're going to go to the control panel, and from here we're going to click on hardware and device manager. And now we have to copy on all of this because we're going to need drivers later. Shut off our computer. Goodbye Windows XP, I promise I'll be back. And here's our installation CD, and let's boot from the CD-ROM. Luckily, the Windows 98 installation CD also comes with F-Disk. This version of F-Disk is actually slightly different. It can make FAT32 partitions of up to 64 GB, unlike the usual MS-DOS F-Disk with only 2 GB because of a FAT16 limit. Ah yes, the iconic Windows 98 setup page. From here we can click custom because we want to see what we can install. You know, Windows 11 can only make FAT32 partitions of up to 32 GB. I suppose Windows 98 is actually better than Windows 11 in terms of partitioning. I wonder why. Maybe it's a design choice. Maybe Microsoft doesn't want you to use FAT32 because it's macOS compatible. I mean, macOS is kind of their competitor after all. I also heard that in America, a bunch of internet service providers are shutting off their dial-up services. I guess it makes sense. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are still using dial-up in 2026. The first time I've ever browsed the internet was in 2014. I was 4 at the time. I'd go on Baidu and print out mazes for me to solve. This was after we got our first Wi-Fi router. And a few years later, right before the pandemic, we told the internet service provider that we didn't really need a telephone service anymore. Anyways, that should be all we need. Here is the identification. We set our computer name and our work group. Not sure what to call my computer name. We can always change this later. I'm not really accustomed to my PS2 keyboard. In case you're wondering, I'm using a fairly modern Logitech K100 Classic keyboard. It feels pretty tactile, but it's really easy to make typos. Let's check our keyboard layout. Yeah, that seems correct. Establishing your location. We're in China, so we're gonna look for China. There we go. Ah yes, Windows 98 setup has completed copying files. Now we just have to restart our computer and start phase 2 of setup. Okay, here we just type in the user information. Name is Alex, company Duda Puda 64, although it's not really a company, but whatever. Ah yes, the license agreement, the only thing that nobody ever reads. Now, we just have to set our time zone. We are Shanghai time, which is GMT plus 8 o'clock. We're just going to use Beijing Standard Time. It's practically the same. Apply and OK. This is the part where you enter a Windows password, but you can just click escape or cancel to skip it. Oh, our plug-and-play monitor also showed up on Windows 98. That's pretty surprising. Yeah, I'm totally sure Windows 98 definitely has some kind of plug-and-play monitor driver. And there we go, we found it. Obviously, this isn't the end of it. We still have a lot of drivers to install, and we have to optimize everything and personalize it to, well, what I like. First of all, as you can see, there's not really any sound. Secondly, we're using a display driver, so it's running at low resolution at 16 colors. We're gonna need to install some drivers. I have a bad feeling about this. The first thing we're gonna do is to go to the CD I burned that contains Autopatcher. As the name suggests, Autopatcher patches your computer. It installs hotfixes, bug fixes, and a bunch of updates. And now setup is complete. Now we just have to launch Autopatcher and start the auto-patching process. I downloaded this Windows 98 SE setup CD from archive.org. This version is Autopatcher 2008. The original version is probably still on Vogons. If you haven't checked out that forum, you probably should. It has some pretty cool stuff on there. After finishing Autopatcher, we're going to go back to my computer and we're going to install some drivers. This is my other CD. Obviously, for Windows 98 to see all of our hardware correctly, we need to install our Intel chipset drivers. This is the Intel 845 chipset driver, which is made specifically for my motherboard. As you can see, Windows 98 has found quite a bit of hardware on the system. We're gonna install all of the drivers that we currently can, and if Windows 98 is missing some drivers, we can always download more. Next up, we got the NUSB drivers. Surprisingly, Windows 98 doesn't actually have built-in USB support. This is because USB wasn't much of a standard back then. Sadly, I later realized that my motherboard doesn't actually have USB drive support. This is NVIDIA Forceware. It's basically NVIDIA drivers for Windows 98. Our MX400 was one of the last graphics cards to actually have Windows 98 drivers, which was lucky. Now that's how you know the display driver worked. As you can see, not only do we have a higher resolution and more colors, everything's a lot more snappier. Now let's turn up our system resolution to the maximum supported. Large fonts for better visibility. We're limiting our refresh rate to 60Hz because our monitor only supports 60Hz, and we don't want to draw too much power from our power supply. I'm glad this monitor actually has an information page that shows you the maximum refresh rate and resolution. Sadly, this monitor has quite a low resolution, and it only has one VGA port. Something doesn't seem right. Oh, I know, we're gonna go to monitor settings and set the aspect ratio back to 16:9. And now we can enjoy the full glory of Windows 98 in widescreen. We're gonna quickly downgrade our network card to something Windows 98 actually supports. My driver CD has RTL 8029 drivers. But why do we need 2 network cards if there's a faster one on the motherboard? I'll explain later. During recording, I couldn't install the audio driver no matter how hard I tried. And in the end, I got a blue screen. While I was scrambling and panicking, I remembered that Windows 98 lets you bypass blue screens by pressing escape, and so I did. And this is what happened. Oh, at least we know the sound works. Now back to network cards. The reason I installed a secondary network card was because the one from my motherboard didn't have drivers on the CD. So instead of burning a new CD, I can just transfer the driver via an FTP server using my other network card. Usually when you open Internet Explorer for the first time, it's going to ask you for a modem and ask you to connect to Microsoft Network. However, if you set up your internet connection through the system control panel, you get to bypass all of this. Setting up an FTP server is still relatively easy. It takes about 5 minutes. Basically, you start a shared folder on your MacBook that your Windows 98 can actually access. And with that, we have successfully downgraded from Windows XP to Windows 98. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. God the world with kindness and love of your hearts. Have a wonderful day. This is Alex, and I'll see you next time.